making use of their now infamous bayonet charge, which had earned them the title of scalp hunters in the eyes of German commanders.
Alright y'all, welcome back to Combat Arms channel. Okay, so you guys know I like doing special reaction videos for special holidays. So today I'm trying to branch out and we are covering New Zealand. So for Waitangi Day, we are checking out a video from the Front YouTube channel. They always do a lot of good stuff. This particular video is called What Happens When a Culture Forged by War Goes to War. So I think it's specifically talking about the Māori. I'm not exactly sure if they're going to talk about more specifically just, you know, Polynesian countries in general, like, you know, American Samoa, Tonga, New Zealand. There's a bunch of them, so I'm not sure. I think this is going to focus primarily on the Māori, so that would be good for Waitangi Day. Now, I gotta say, I don't know any Māori personally. I've served with a few Samoans, and I gotta say, you know when you're serving with the Samoan, because those guys are tough as nails. I'm not sure if it just goes back to the Polynesian, like, warrior culture. Again, if I'm talking out of my ass at any point, feel free to correct me down in the comment section because I'm probably not going to know everything. So hopefully, again, we can get some education through this video. Also, feel free to correct me on my pronunciation of everything. I feel like I'm pretty confident on these words, but again, someone who's like a native speaker might know how to say it a little bit closer or more accurate. So feel free to do that, but let's check out this cool video.
While the century in which Eastern Polynesians settled New Zealand seems to be a little bit up in the air, the people which evolved from those settlers, the Mori, are anything but. Mori culture, Mori tanga, is rich and distinct, and it not only survived European settlement, but shaped and continues to shape New Zealand and its culture to this day. Of all aspects of traditional Mori culture, one is the most relevant to this channel, that being warfare. The Mori people were and still are divided into tribes. And for land, resources, revenge, or mana, which basically means spiritual power and prestige, these tribes would often go to war. To wage war and defend.
So I did know that there were different tribes, and you kind of see it if you look at the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi. You have all these different chiefs that are signing for the tribes and whatnot. So I'm not exactly sure how the tribes fit in with each other, if it was like constant warfare or if it was just, you know, like certain peaks where it was getting a little bit more prevalent and then certain times where it was receding. But I'd also like to learn how these different tribes work together with like maybe even like outside threats. I'm not sure when the outside threat really like came into play, except I guess when the British were going there. But yeah, hopefully we can get some more information about that too.
Tribes, the Mori people, both men and women, were trained in the art from a young age, and this aspect of their culture persisted into the 20th century, inspiring the bravest of the Mori to join the New Zealand Expeditionary Force in both the First and Second World Wars.
Okay. This channel does some really good stuff. I'm pretty excited.
To understand Māori involvement in World War II, it helps to have a basic idea of their involvement in World War I. At the onset of the First World War, there was a disparity over whether or not Māori should be enlisted to fight. Though encouraged by prospects of equality with the Pākehā, the non-Māori New Zealanders, among other motivations, enough Māori warriors were eventually recruited to form an entire battalion of the New Zealand Expeditionary Force.
Are they doing like the haka to... Who is that? I'd like to check out a video specifically about the haka, because I gotta say, you still see it like sticking around today, even before like football matches. You know, sometimes they'll do it.
While Māori served in other units, this particular unit was called the New Zealand Pioneer Battalion, or as it came to be known, simply the Māori Pioneer Battalion, and it saw service in the Gallipoli campaign and on the Western Front. Overall, some 2,200 Māori served in the unit, of which 730 were wounded and 336 were killed.
Whoa, no kidding,
Opposed to fascism and with strong economic, defensive and sentimental ties with Great Britain, New Zealand wasted no time and declared war on Germany at the start of World War II. Just days after this, the New Zealand government announced the Second New Zealand Expeditionary Force. Though, even before New Zealand had declared war, a Māori by the name of Sir Apirana Ngata was advocating for an all-Māori military unit to be formed.
Wait, he said sir. I don't know if he... So he was like actually like knighted, or I mean, I imagine it works the same if it's still in New Zealand. That's kind of cool. I wonder what he got knighted for.
Unit to be formed, following in the wake of the Māori Pioneer Battalion from the First World War and gaining traction. Heeding Ngata, two Māori members of the New Zealand Parliament, Oryira Tirukatane and Parari Pakia, echoed this idea of a second battalion through Middle Earth, New Zealand, offering it as a chance for the bravest Māori to stand alongside the Pakia and the British Empire to pay the price of citizenship and to prove themselves as warriors in a modern frontier. The New Zealand government allowed for the creation of a Māori infantry battalion led by Pakia officers with the intent of replacing them with Māori officers as soon as possible. While there was some opposition, the government stuck by their decision, appointing Major George Dittmer to the battalion and choosing Lieutenant Colonel George Bertrand, a Pod Māori World War I veteran, to be Dittmer's second in command.
So I kind of wonder if it struck a nerve. It sounds like, I don't know, the way he worded it sounded a little bit weird, but it's like they wanted a Māori and not, you know, anybody else to be in charge of this specific unit. Of course, like he was saying, he is a World War I veteran, so he's definitely seasoned. But I wonder if it struck a nerve because it made it sound like they wanted a Māori specifically. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but...
While Mori served in units beyond this battalion, including the Royal Air Force and Navy, we'll be focusing on this one infantry battalion in this video. During the selection of the battalion's other officers, the recruitment process began, and in just 3 weeks, almost 900 Māori men had volunteered to fill the ranks.
Nice.
In January 1940, the battalion gathered at Palmerston North Showgrounds, where it was decided that it would be organised into 4 rifle companies to which Māori recruits were assigned depending on their tribes and the regions thereof. It's also important to note that men from Pacific Islands, the Chatham Islands, and the Stewart Islands made up a part of one of these companies. In February, the battalion was issued equipment and training commenced. Fresh out of rural existence, many of the Māori assigned to technical trades such as medical orderlies, mechanics, and drivers had to learn their trades from scratch. On top of this, a lot of training time was lost attending to Māori dental hygiene, and many Māori struggled to fit their feet into the boots which had been tailored for narrow Pakia feet, literally. These, among a plethora of other issues, were overcome, and in no small part eased by the cheerful disposition and overall eagerness of the Māori recruits, and they went on to perform remarkably well in their training. On the 19th of February, Major General Dugan told the battalion, "As a man who has had a very long experience in the army, not far off 40 years, I can tell you this, that if I had been informed that in such a short time you would reach such a very high standard in your drill and your movements, I would never have believed it."
Damn, that's
in
saying
March,
a lot. After
the
40
28th
years?
Battalion was declared active, and in May, with 39 officers and 642 Māori and other ranks, it set out for war as an attachment which moved between the 3 infantry brigades of the 2nd New Zealand Division, part of the 2nd New Zealand Expeditionary Force. It would, however, be a little while before the battalion had its first engagement with the Axis. Fearing the invasion of the UK by the German Wehrmacht, the Mori Battalion were sent to defend the island under the 2nd New Zealand Division. Here, the battalion received further training and then praised by King George IV, who was impressed by their physique, keenness, and determined demeanour. After the threat of the invasion subsided, the battalion was redeployed in Egypt via the Middle East.
So, Egypt. Oh man, that must be... it's always interesting to hear, like, especially like in New Zealand, it doesn't look anything like Egypt. So it's always interesting to hear how they go from one terrain to a completely different terrain and they're still like really successful. I mean, it goes to show with just the discipline that was being instilled in general, but also just the flexibility that the particular troops had, which is kind of cool to hear about. But then going to a place like Egypt, I gotta say, I don't know a whole lot about the Egyptian campaign during World War II because I don't even know if the U.S. was really too involved with that, but for them to get called up to go to Egypt, I'm sure it must have been like either exciting or also confusing just because Egypt is just like a big desert. It's very different.
After being reinforced in a camp at Boyrie, Egypt, having had a portion of their forces put to bed by influenza, the battalion was moved to Alexandria and then was shipped to Greece, where it saw some action. Attached to New Zealand's 5th Infantry Brigade and as part of a British, Australian and New Zealander deployment, the Mori Battalion were posted to north of Katoni, Greece, to defend against the German invasion in April 1941. Ordered to retreat from the Germans, the battalion withdrew south, running out wires, digging and attempting to slow their enemy with mortars. Eventually, the bulk of the unit made it to Athens, where they would be transported away via the beach, though in the confusion of the withdrawal, the unit's carrier and mortar platoons were separated, and many of them were captured. In Greece, 83 members of the battalion were taken as prisoner of war, 11 were wounded and taken, 6 were just wounded, and 10 were killed.
This sounds like a logistical nightmare. I can't imagine. I mean, again, it's World War II, so there's a lot of crap going around, but like for them to go from New Zealand to Egypt, to a different part of Egypt, I guess the flu is also not helping with all of that. And then going to Greece and then pulling out of Greece, but also not pulling everybody out, seems like, yeah, it must have been a nightmare. So I think at that point, it would really depend on the leadership to make sure everybody still had a good idea and understanding of what their mission was at the time. But it seemed like this happened in a pretty short time. I think they said this was still 1941, so still pretty early on in the war.
Evacuated from Greece, the Mori Battalion was shipped to Crete, where they covered the 5th Infantry Brigade's flank at the village of Platanius. German glider troops and paratroopers attacked the airfield that the 5th Infantry was defending, though not the position held by the Mori Battalion. When the 5th called for reinforcements, a company from the Mori Battalion approached in the cover of night, stumbling upon a platoon worth of Germans on the way and forcing them to surrender. Upon their surrender, one of the Germans decided to throw a grenade at the company, wounding 2 of its men.
Damn.
So the Maoris fixed their bayonets and charged, killing 24 Germans.
Oh my gosh, bad move.
Took part in a series of engagements throughout the island, including an even more devastating bayonet charge at 42nd Street.
Damn, they like their bayonets.
The Maoris alone racked up somewhere between 80 and 100 kills against the Germans.
Oh, I hope that with just the bayonets. That's pretty funny. I don't know if they just decide to use the bayonets over anything else. Maybe they just wanted to be like violent or what have you. But again, it's hard to say with World War II. Sometimes, like especially in the cover of night, you can get really close to someone. But yeah, it seems like they had more bayonet action than a lot of other people. Holy cow.
Private Westbrook of the 18th Battalion wrote, "The name Mori was almost a byword with the Tommies. Their continual bayonet charges and the havoc they caused among the Jerrys with cold steel earned them the name of Knife Men." When the Allied forces were ordered to evacuate Crete, however, there was not enough room for all of the battalion, so 6 officers and 144 men stayed on the island and covered the evacuation. Throughout their defense of Crete, 67 members of the Mori Battalion were captured, 102 were wounded, and 74 were killed.
Damn.
And Old Mate Dittmar earned a Distinguished Service Order for his gallant leadership. It was now back to Egypt for the battalion, where it held a parade, which included a performance of the haka for the king and queen. Pushing into Libya with the 5th Infantry Brigade, the Mori Battalion fought against tanks and motorized infantry and assisted in the 2nd New Zealand Division's breakout from Minka Kame, making use of their now infamous bayonet charge, which had earned them the title of scalp hunters in the eyes of German commanders, Erwin Rommel included.
I gotta say, the US Marines got the nickname Devil Dog from the Germans, which I gotta say sounds kind of cool, but scalp hunters? Man, that's like on a completely different level.
Erwin Rommel included. In November 1941, Dittmar was wounded by artillery following the capture of the Italian-held town of Solem, and the battalion was soon under the command of a Māori, Lieutenant Colonel Eria Love, for the first time. In December, a private by the name of Charles Shelford and his section had pushed a little too far into Italian territory during an attack on Galaza, Libya. With the enemy firing on him at both flanks, Shelford charged toward an Italian trench, firing from the hip, and after his legs were full of grenade shrapnel, lobbed a grenade of his own into the trench, triggering the Italian commanding officer to surrender. While recommended for a Victoria Cross for his actions, Shelford, who survived and made it back to New Zealand, was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal. Even after high casualties in the Second Battle of El Alamein toward the end of 1942, the Mori Battalion stayed to defend Medellin before it went to decimate a German Panzergrenadier division in the Tabaga Gap. Second Lieutenant Moana Nuakiwa Ngaramu led an attack here, obliterating German machine guns and fighting with a counterattack.
The use of the word obliterated.
Unit fought with their enemies at close quarters throughout the night, and it's said that Ngaramu fought with stones at times over his gun. The following morning, the remainder of his platoon was attacked. Ngaramu put his gun to his hip and sprayed at the enemy until he dropped dead. For his bravery here, he received a Victoria Cross. In April
Good
1943, the battalion attacked the Tunisian village of Takruna with the 5th Infantry Brigade. Here, after scaling the escarpment the Italians had fortified, copping shell fire and engaging in hand-to-hand combat, Sergeant Hane Turawana Mahani and a handful of men eventually captured Italian machine gun and mortar positions and forced the Italians to surrender.
Again, this is the reason why I love checking out these videos, because there's a lot of really cool stories that you would never hear about unless you checked out like certain videos like this, or you heard it from like, you know, word of mouth from somebody else. I mean, even like at the Imperial War Museum, I saw a lot of Victoria Cross citations, but you can only get so much exposure from like a museum and what have you. So checking out these videos gives you a lot more information you wouldn't get in other places.
He was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal for his actions, though he was recommended for and probably should have received a Victoria Cross. After North Africa and after Italy's surrender, the Mori Battalion entered the Italian campaign under the 5th Infantry Brigade and the 2nd New Zealand Division to fight against the Germans. The combat around Monte Cassino, a rocky hill capped with a Benedictine monastery, devastated the battalion, with 128 out of the 200 Māori and A and B companies becoming casualties. With this loss, the battalion did not return to the front until July 1944, where it advanced with the Allies to Florence. The battalion's last involvement in the war was in the battles along Senio, Saturno, Salaro, Gania, and Edisi rivers, in which the Allies pushed the Germans back to the city of Trieste.
They're staying busy.
Of the 3,600 which fought in the Mori Battalion throughout World War II, 649 died and 1,172 were wounded, and the battalion received more individual decorations than any other from New Zealand. Bernard Freyberg, a general officer commanding the 2nd New Zealand Expeditionary Force, famously said, "No infantry had a more distinguished record or saw more fighting, or alas, had such heavy casualties as the Māori Battalion."
It definitely sounds like they were busy.
Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Baker, a man of Māori descent who was second in command of D Company for a while and in command of A Company after Crete, reflecting on the war, wrote, "I congratulate every platoon individually on its splendid effort and am proud of the command which I hold. When our losses are compared with those of the enemy, and when we consider the effect it had on enemy plans, the operation cannot be regarded as anything but an outstanding success." The above message is to be conveyed to every member of the battalion. And in 2012, Bunty Priest, a 92-year-old Chatham Island veteran who marched through Italy in the Māori Battalion, said, "We were proud of what we were and what we were doing." I think...
Okay. So I like to check out some of the awards. I mean, just like the British military, you guys don't get that many awards compared to like the US military. The US military gives out a lot of awards for just like really nothing, to be honest, a lot of the time. But yeah, you know, if he had these many medals, he was staying pretty freaking busy. This one looks really interesting. I've never seen this one particularly. If you guys know what this one is, then definitely let me know, because it looks pretty intricate. But like they're saying with the previous officer talking here, it is really cool to hear this sort of stuff from officers that have been there, that were, you know, in the shit, for lack of a better term, with all the troops, and then they can send out these messages to them. It seems like there was a good like mutual respect between like the leadership and the people actually serving. But I mean, after serving in all those different battles, of course, there's going to be a very, very strong bond. I mean, there's a cultural bond already, but after all that, the bond is going to be like unreal.
We were and what we were doing. I think it goes without saying that the 28th Māori Battalion would have made their warrior ancestors very proud. So guys, that's a little bit of history of the Māori Battalion in World War I and World War II. And if you want to hear anything about these kind of more obscure units in World War II, make sure you let me know which ones in the comment section below, and I'm going to try my hardest to make it into a video. Anyway.
Okay, very cool. I'll put the original video in the description if you guys want to go check out this video, or if you want to go check out this channel in general. Again, they do some cool stuff, and it's nice to get some more appreciation for just the individual stories. You hear a lot of stories from like World War I and World War II, but it's not necessarily so personal. You don't know so much about the units, or you know what the unit has been through, even like the cultural background if it's a particular unit like this. you can't really understand it that much. So getting videos like this really helps, especially when you get a story and then you get a name to the story and then all the background information. Yeah, you can see these guys were moving around a lot, staying busy, and the casualties seem pretty substantial. It is World War II, so there's going to be more casualties than a lot of people would be able to appreciate. But for the resiliency of the leadership and the troops to move around a lot and suffer these casualties and continue to move on to more locations and fight and earn nicknames like scalp hunters, like, it takes a certain mindset to be able to continue to do that. And again, it's nice to get exposure with these sorts of videos. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you have any particular videos or any particular stories that you can recommend down in the comment section about specific like Māori individuals, or maybe even like other Polynesian cultures and how they served in different aspects during these wars, that would be really cool to learn about. Or just more like information about the Māori in general, or New Zealand, or even Waitangi Day, because again, that is why we are doing this reaction video. So if you guys have some personal experiences to share as far as family members serving, or, you know, again, some more background information for something we might have talked about in the video, please throw it down below so we can educate ourselves a little bit more. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Again, I will try and branch out and do some more holidays and special reaction videos for those. So if you guys have anything to recommend for that, then put it down below. Now, I say it a lot, but I can't really voice how much it actually means to me to get all of these recommendations, because you guys will voice and let me know what is personal to you, whether it be like personal relations to specific individuals or events or battles. And it makes it a lot more personal for me when I can see what is personal for all of y'all, if that makes any sense, because you have this personal connection and you're sharing it with me so I can share it with everybody else. And it's kind of like a privileged position that I'm in, where I'm able to get all these, you know, these experiences, what you guys care about, and share it with everybody else. Because again, there's a lot of really fantastic stories out there. There's a lot of stuff that people haven't heard about, and it's just really awesome. It's special for me to be able to get all of that and sort of share it with everybody else. So I really do appreciate it. I know I say it a lot, you know, thanks for the recommendations, but I really do mean it. It means a whole lot to see what is personal for all of y'all, and for y'all to share all of that with me. But yeah, thank you again for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for commenting, all that good stuff. But that is it for this video. I will see y'all in the next one.